The Sixth Extinction, An Unnatural History, by Elizabeth Kolbert. Introduction. Imagine you're a biologist, deep in the misty rainforests of Panama. You're there to study one of the most beautiful creatures on Earth, the Panamanian golden frog. It's a brilliant taxicab yellow creature, a symbol of good luck so revered that its image is printed on lottery tickets. For years, you could walk along certain streams and see thousands of them sunning themselves on the banks. It was, as one scientist put it, absolutely insane. But then, one day, you return to your research site, and there's silence. The frogs are gone. Not just a few of them. All of them. Vanished. You move to a new site, farther east, hoping it was a fluke. The frogs there seem healthy, vibrant. And then, it happens again. The silence follows you. A mysterious blight is sweeping through the jungle, wiping out amphibians faster than anyone can understand. In a desperate race against time, a team of scientists decides to do something extraordinary. They begin collecting every golden frog they can find, trying to save a remnant of the species before it's too late. But they have nowhere to put them. Their new lab isn't ready. So, in a moment of inspired desperation, they check the frogs into a local bed and breakfast. They rent out a block of rooms, fill them with tanks, and create what the locals start calling the Frog Hotel. It's an incredible story. Amphibians getting maid service, enjoying fresh meals that literally hop off the plate. It sounds like something from a children's book. But behind this charming, almost absurd image lies a much darker, more profound truth. It's the story of a planetary crisis unfolding right before our eyes. Today, we're diving into a book that pulls back the curtain on that crisis. The Sixth Extinction, An Unnatural History by Elizabeth Kolbert is not just a book, it's a Pulitzer Prize-winning piece of journalism that serves as a landmark account of our present moment. Kolbert, a staff writer for The New Yorker, traveled the globe for this book, from the Amazon rainforest to the Great Barrier Reef, from the Andes Mountains to a cave in upstate New York, piecing together a story that is at once thrilling, terrifying, and deeply human. This isn't just a book about dying animals. It's a book about the very history of life and the unprecedented role that one species, our own, has come to play in it. By the end of our journey today, you will understand not only what a mass extinction is, but you will see the invisible forces that are driving one right now. You'll understand that the story of the Sixth Extinction is not happening somewhere far away. It's happening everywhere. And it is our story. Book summary. Our story begins with an idea. An idea so obvious to us now that we teach it to toddlers, but so radical that for most of human history, no one could even conceive of it. The idea of extinction. For centuries, the greatest thinkers, from Aristotle onward, believed in a perfect, unbroken great chain of being. The world was created by a divine architect, and every creature had its place. To imagine a species simply disappearing was like imagining a link in that chain breaking. It was unthinkable. It was blasphemy. So when strange giant bones started turning up in fields and quarries across Europe and America, people had to get creative. Those colossal teeth, they must have belonged to giants from the Bible. Those massive femurs, they were from elephants that had been washed north during Noah's flood. The world was a fixed, static stage, and all the actors were still on it, somewhere. Then, at the turn of the 19th century, a brilliant French naturalist named Georges Cuvier stood in a Paris museum, staring at the molar of a creature unearthed in the Ohio Valley of America. It looked a bit like an elephant's tooth, but not quite. The tops were pointed and knobby, unlike the flat, ridged molars of living elephants. Everyone else had tried to fit this square peg into a round hole. They called it an elephant, a hippopotamus, some strange hybrid. But Cuvier, with his unparalleled knowledge of anatomy, did something revolutionary. He trusted the evidence of his own eyes. He declared that this tooth, and the massive bones that came with it, belonged to an animal that no longer existed. An espèce perdue. A lost species. It was a my God moment for science. With that single insight, the walls of the old worldview came crashing down. Life, Cuvier realized, wasn't a static tableau. It was a story. A long, dramatic, and often violent history, filled with creatures that had appeared, thrived, and then vanished forever. Cuvier had discovered a world previous to ours, one wiped out by what he called revolutions on the surface of the earth, sudden, terrible catastrophes. Cuvier's idea of catastrophism was thrilling, but it soon faced a powerful challenger. A young English geologist named Charles Lyell argued that the Earth's history was not one of sudden revolutions, but of slow, steady, gradual change. The same forces of erosion, sedimentation, and volcanic activity we see today, he said, were all that was needed to explain the past, given enough time. The present is the key to the past, became his mantra. And soon, another Charles Darwin, would apply the same gradualist thinking to the living world. For Darwin, extinction wasn't a catastrophe, it was the inevitable, slow-motion consequence of evolution. In the great struggle for existence, new, improved forms would naturally arise, and the older, less fit forms would slowly fade away. Extinction and evolution were two sides of the same coin, a process so slow, Darwin wrote, that we see nothing of these slow changes in progress. It was a neat, elegant theory. But there was a problem. While Darwin was quietly developing his ideas in the English countryside, an extinction was happening right under his nose. And it wasn't slow at all. It was the story of the great auk. The great auk was the original penguin, a large, flightless bird of the North Atlantic. For centuries, its population numbered in the millions. Sailors traveling to Newfoundland would stop at a place called Funk Island, where hundreds of thousands of auks nested. The birds were so fat and unafraid that they could be herded onto ships like stones. They were used for food, for fish bait, and even for fuel. In a particularly gruesome practice, sailors would light a fire under a kettle and feed the flames with the bodies of other auks, their oily flesh burning brightly. By the early 1800s, the great slaughter had reduced the millions to just a handful. The bird's very rarity made it a prize for collectors, who now hunted the last survivors for their skins and eggs. In June of 1844, on a desolate volcanic rock off the coast of Iceland, 3 fishermen rowed ashore. They found the very last known breeding pair of great auks. They cornered the birds, strangled them, and, seeing that their single egg was cracked, left it behind on the rocks. And just like that, a species that had existed for thousands of years was gone. This was not a slow, gradual fading. It was a sudden, violent, human-caused extermination. It didn't fit the neat, uniformitarian picture. It looked a lot more like one of Cuvier's catastrophes. For more than a century, science lived with this tension. The dominant view remained Darwinian: change is slow, and extinction is the gentle background hum of life. The fossil record, with its jarring gaps and sudden disappearances, was seen as deeply flawed. As Darwin himself wrote, it was like a history book with most of its pages torn out. And then, in the 1970s, another "my God" moment arrived. It came from a thin layer of clay in a gorge in Gubbio, Italy. A young geologist named Walter Alvarez was studying the limestone cliffs there. He noticed something odd. The layers of rock from the end of the Cretaceous period, the age of dinosaurs, were packed with the fossils of tiny marine creatures called forams. Then, right at the boundary, there was a half-inch layer of clay, completely empty. And above that clay, the forams that reappeared were totally different. and much smaller. It looked like a catastrophe. But what could have caused it? Walter took the puzzle to his father, Luis Alvarez, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist at Berkeley, a man known for his wild ideas. Luis suggested a brilliant way to time how long it took for that clay layer to form. The Earth is constantly showered with microscopic cosmic dust, which contains a rare element called iridium. He reasoned that the longer the clay took to deposit, the more iridium it would contain. They sent the samples to a lab for analysis. Months later, the call came. Something was wrong with the clay. The iridium levels weren't just high, they were off the charts. It wasn't the result of a slow, steady cosmic rain. It was the signal of something enormous, something extraterrestrial. After batting around theories, they landed on a truly wild idea. 66 million years ago, an asteroid 6 miles wide had slammed into the Earth. The impact released more energy than 1,000,000 of the most powerful hydrogen bombs ever tested. It blasted a cloud of debris and iridium around the globe, turning day into night, plunging the planet into a long, dark impact winter, and changing the very chemistry of the oceans. It was the smoking gun. Cuvier had been right. Catastrophes do happen. The dinosaurs, the ammonites, the plesiosaurs, they hadn't slowly faded away. They had been wiped out by the worst day in the history of life. The discovery of the asteroid impact was a paradigm shift. It forced scientists to see that history is not always a slow, straight line. It is, instead, long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer panic. And this brings us back to the golden frogs in their hotel. The discovery of past catastrophes opened our eyes to the possibility of a present one. We began to realize that we, one weedy species, were now the asteroid. The story Elizabeth Kolbert tells in The Sixth Extinction is of her journey to the front lines of this new, human-made catastrophe. And what she finds is that we are not just a single force of destruction. We are unleashing multiple catastrophes at once. Let's start with the frogs. What was the mysterious blight that swept through the rainforest? It turned out to be a fungus. A chytrid fungus, to be precise, now known as Batrachochytrium dendrobatidis, or BD for short. It's a psychrophile, a cold-loving fungus, that attacks the skin of amphibians, disrupting their ability to absorb electrolytes and essentially causing them to die of a heart attack. But where did it come from? The fungus appears to have emerged on multiple continents: Central America, South America, Australia, all at roughly the same time. This is impossible through natural dispersal. The only explanation is that we moved it. One theory holds that BD was spread around the globe with shipments of African clawed frogs, which were used in pregnancy tests in the mid-20th century. Another suggests it was spread by North American bullfrogs, exported for frog leg soup. Either way, the story is the same. By moving species around the world, in the ballast water of ships, in the cargo bays of planes, in our suitcases and on the soles of our shoes, we are undoing millions of years of geographic isolation. We are, in effect, reassembling the ancient supercontinent of Pangaea. Kolbert calls this the new Pangaea. This global reshuffling is like a planetary game of Russian roulette. Most of the time, an introduced species fails to establish itself. But every now and then, you get a bullet in the chamber, a species freed from its native predators and competitors, a phenomenon known as enemy release, can erupt, with devastating consequences. We see this with the brown tree snake in Guam, which ate its way through almost all the island's native birds. We see it with the zebra mussel in North America, clogging waterways and collapsing ecosystems. And we see it now, in our own backyards, with the bats. Just a few years after the frog crisis became known, biologists in upstate New York discovered bats dying by the thousands. Their noses were covered in a strange white fuzz. It was another fungus, Geomyces destructans, also a cold-loving psychrophile. It had almost certainly been brought over from Europe by a tourist exploring a cave. European bats, having co-evolved with the fungus, are largely immune. But for North American bats, which had never encountered it, the interaction was novel and catastrophically deadly. The fungus irritates them during hibernation, causing them to wake up and burn through their precious winter fat stores. They fly out into the frozen landscape in a desperate search for insects that aren't there, and they die of starvation. The death toll is now in the millions. The little brown bat, once one of the most common mammals in North America, is now facing extinction. The new Pangea is not just bringing new species together, it's driving old ones apart, forever. But this is only one of the pressures we're applying. Kolbert then takes us on a journey to a world that is becoming not just more connected, but chemically alien. She travels to a tiny island off the coast of Italy, Castello Aragonese. There, volcanic vents on the seafloor pump bubbles of carbon dioxide directly into the water, creating a natural laboratory. As you swim toward the vents, the pH of the water drops, becoming more acidic. And as you swim, the world around you changes. Far from the vents, the sea is teeming with life, barnacles, mussels, sea urchins, corals. But as you approach the acidic water, life begins to drop away. The barnacles disappear. The mussels are gone. The sea urchins vanish. The shells of the few limpets that remain are so thin they're almost transparent, literally dissolving in the water. Right next to the vents, the vibrant ecosystem has collapsed into a green, slimy wasteland, home only to jellyfish and algae. What you are swimming through, Kolbert explains, is the future of our oceans. For the past 200 years, we have been pumping billions of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The oceans have absorbed about a third of it. This is changing the fundamental chemistry of the seas. It's a process often called global warming's equally evil twin, ocean acidification. The oceans are becoming more acidic at a rate faster than anything seen in the last 300 million years. This is a catastrophe for a huge class of creatures known as calcifiers, organisms that build shells or skeletons out of calcium carbonate. This includes corals, clams, oysters, and countless species of plankton that form the base of the entire marine food web. For these creatures, building a shell in acidic water is like trying to build a house while someone is stealing your bricks. It takes more and more energy, until eventually the water becomes so corrosive that their shells begin to dissolve. To see what this means for the planet, Kolbert travels halfway around the world, to One Tree Island, a tiny research station on the Great Barrier Reef. Coral reefs have been called the rainforests of the sea. They cover less than 1% of the ocean floor but support a quarter of all marine species. They are oases of staggering diversity in the nutrient-poor deserts of tropical waters. But they are calcifiers, and they are in deep trouble. Studies have shown that as CO2 levels rise and the saturation state of the water drops, corals' ability to build their stony skeletons declines. Eventually, the rate of erosion from waves and boring worms will overtake the rate of growth. The reef will begin to dissolve. Add to this the stress of rising water temperatures, which causes coral bleaching, a process where the corals expel the symbiotic algae that feed them and turn a ghostly white, and the future looks grim. Scientists now predict that by the middle of this century, if we continue on our current path, all the world's coral reefs will cease to grow and begin to waste away. An entire ecosystem, one of the most vibrant and ancient on Earth, will collapse. The sixth extinction isn't just about shuffling species or changing chemistry. It's also about changing the climate so fast that life simply can't keep up. Kolbert's next journey takes us high into the Andes Mountains of Peru, with a forest ecologist named Miles Silman. Silman has set up a series of research plots running from the Amazon basin up to the treeless peaks, a vertical transect that covers a huge range of temperatures. The tropics, home to the vast majority of the world's species, have historically been very stable, climatically. This has allowed species to become highly specialized, adapted to very narrow temperature bands. A tree that thrives at one elevation may be completely absent just a few hundred feet higher or lower. As the world warms, these temperature bands are shifting. To stay in their comfort zone, species have to move. On a mountain, that means moving upslope. And what Silman's data shows is astonishing. The forest is already on the move. Some tree species are migrating up the mountain at a rate of 8 feet per year. But not all species are moving at the same speed. Some, like the hyperactive Schefflera genus, are racing uphill at nearly 100 feet a year. Others, like the glossy-leaved ilex, are just sitting there, inert. This is the critical problem. An ecological community is not a collection of individual species, it's a web of intricate relationships. As different species respond to warming at different rates, that web begins to tear apart. The pollinator loses its flower. The bird loses its insect prey. The tree loses its seed disperser. Communities that have been stable for thousands of years will be torn asunder, and new, unpredictable ones will form. And even if a species can move fast enough, where's it supposed to go? This brings us to Kolbert's final stop in the Amazon, at the world's largest and longest-running ecological experiment, the Biological Dynamics of Forest Fragments Project. 30 years ago, scientists convinced ranchers who were clearing land to leave behind perfect, square islands of untouched rainforest, ranging from a few acres to a few hundred. These fragments became laboratories for studying what happens when we carve up the wild. The results have been a long, slow lesson in loss. When a forest is fragmented, it begins to relax, a deceptively gentle term for a process of bleeding species. Large predators that need a wide range disappear. Specialized birds that won't cross open clearings vanish. Army ants, which support a whole ecosystem of followers, can't survive in small fragments, and so the ant-following birds disappear with them. An invisible extinction debt is created, a roster of species that are doomed, even if they're still hanging on. Now add climate change to this picture. A species trapped in a forest fragment, needing to migrate to track the warming climate but blocked by a sea of cattle pasture, is a species with nowhere to go. It's a double bind. We are forcing species to move, and at the same time, we are creating barriers that prevent them from moving. This brings us to the most unsettling part of the story. The pattern of extinction we see today, hitting large animals, specialized species, and isolated populations the hardest, is not new. It's a pattern that began long ago. And it follows our own footsteps across the globe. Tens of thousands of years ago, the world was full of giants, mammoths and mastodons in North America, rhinoceros-sized wombats in Australia, 10-foot-tall kangaroos, and giant ground sloths. These megafauna had thrived for millions of years. Then, humans arrived. In Australia, the megafauna vanished around 40,000 years ago, shortly after the first humans appeared. In the Americas, they disappeared around 13,000 years ago, just as human hunters spread across the continents. On islands like Madagascar and New Zealand, the giants survived until much more recently, and then they too vanished, within centuries of human arrival. The timing is too perfect to be a coincidence. Before us, being big and slow to reproduce was a great survival strategy. Once you reached a certain size, you were safe from predators. But that advantage disappeared when a new kind of predator arrived, one that was clever, cooperative, and could kill at a distance. Our ancestors, with just primitive tools, unleashed what has been called a geologically instantaneous ecological catastrophe too gradual to be perceived by the people who unleashed it. And we didn't just kill off other animals. We ran into our own closest relatives. In a lab in Leipzig, Germany, scientist Svante Pääbo has done something once thought impossible. He has sequenced the genome of the Neanderthals. For 100,000 years, Neanderthals thrived in Europe. They were tough, intelligent, and skilled hunters. Then, about 40,000 years ago, modern humans arrived from Africa. And wherever we showed up, the Neanderthals disappeared. But Pääbo's genetic data revealed a shocking twist. Before we replaced them, we had sex with them. As a result, almost everyone of non-African descent today carries between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. They are not entirely gone. A little piece of them lives on in us. The same story appears to be true for another archaic human group discovered through ancient DNA, the Denisovan. We met them, we interbred with them, and then they too vanished. What was it about us? Pääbo speculates about a madness gene, a uniquely human restlessness, a drive to cross oceans where you can't see land, to explore, to innovate, to transform everything we touch. It's the quality that led us to every corner of the globe, that allowed us to build civilizations and create art. And it's the same quality that is now remaking the world in our own image, and in the process, undoing the magnificent, resilient, 3.5 billion year history of life. The final scenes of the book are both heroic and heartbreaking. We meet Suchi, a Sumatran rhino at the Cincinnati Zoo, one of fewer than 100 left in the world. Scientists work tirelessly to get her to conceive through artificial insemination, a process involving hormone shots and an arm-length glove. We meet Kanohi, a Hawaiian crow, one of the last of his kind, all now in captivity. He has no interest in other crows, and so a biologist must try to manually stimulate him in the desperate hope of collecting sperm to save his species from oblivion. These are acts of profound compassion. We are willing to perform handjobs on crows and ultrasounds on rhinos to stave off the extinctions we are causing. We are a species that is both the agent of destruction and the witness to it, capable of profound short-sightedness and profound empathy. And this is the paradox of the Sixth Extinction. It is not an event we are watching from the sidelines. We are the authors, the actors, and, quite possibly, one of the victims. The legacy we are creating is not written in stone or in books, but in the permanent alteration of the very fabric of life. Commentary. Reading The Sixth Extinction is a powerful, humbling, and, I'll admit, unsettling experience. Elizabeth Kolbert doesn't write with anger or preach with judgment. She writes as a witness, a brilliant journalist who simply follows the evidence, from the ice cores of Greenland to the bat caves of New England, letting the story unfold through the eyes of the dedicated scientists on the front lines. And what is the story she tells? It's that the crisis we are in is not the result of some singular, evil act. It's a crisis born from the very qualities that define our success as a species. Our ability to cooperate, to innovate, to transform our environment, our madness, as Svante Pääbo put it, is the engine of the Anthropocene, this new geologic epoch of human dominance. We didn't set out to cause a mass extinction. But we are. The book's most profound lesson, for me, is about the power of rate. The world has been warmer than it is today. The world has had higher concentrations of CO2. But the changes happening now? The rate at which we are pumping carbon into the atmosphere, the speed at which we are moving species around the globe, are, as far as we can tell, unprecedented in Earth's history. Life is resilient, but it adapts on an evolutionary timescale. We are changing the rules of the game on a human timescale, and many species simply can't keep up. So what do we do with this knowledge? It would be easy to fall into despair, to feel that the problem is too big, too complex, too far gone. But that, I think, would be the wrong takeaway. The book is not a eulogy, it's an alarm call. It's a call to awareness. And awareness is where action begins. So here are a few simple things to consider. First, learn to see the invisible connections. The phone in your hand, the food on your plate, the electricity powering your screen, they are all tied to these global systems. The combustion of fossil fuels isn't just an abstract concept, it is actively changing the chemistry of the ocean. The global trade that brings us cheap goods is the same force that moves fungi and snakes and mussels across continents. Understanding these connections is the first step toward making more conscious choices. Second, recognize the value of the wild. The forest fragments in the Amazon teach us a crucial lesson. Nature isn't just a collection of resources for us to use. It's a complex, interconnected system that supports itself and us. Protecting large, intact wilderness isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It provides the resilience that life needs to weather change. Find a local park, a nature reserve, or a conservation group in your area. Support them. Help protect the fragments in your own backyard. Finally, don't lose your sense of wonder. Kolbert's book is filled with loss, but it is also filled with the most incredible creatures, ammonites with snowflake-like shells, frogs the color of the sun, birds with backward-pointing feet in their folklore. These are the products of millions of years of evolutionary artistry. To lose them is to lose a part of the world's beauty and mystery. We are the first generation to understand the magnitude of what we are losing. We are also the last generation with the chance to do something about it. That was a summary of The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Kolbert. We've touched on the major themes and stories today, but a summary is just a map. The real journey happens when you walk the territory yourself. The book itself is a masterpiece of storytelling, filled with details, characters, and moments of quiet revelation that can't be captured here. If any of this has sparked your curiosity or concern, I urge you to pick up a copy. It's not just a book to be read, it's an experience to be absorbed, one that will permanently change the way you see our planet and our place on it. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. It helps us continue to explore the great books that shape our world. Let's keep learning and growing together.